Welcome, dear viewers. Tonight, we dive into a terrifying tale from the depths of Reddit. Sarah Collins, a spirited young woman in her late 20s, exuded an aura of determination and ambition. With her striking green eyes and auburn hair that cascaded in soft waves, she carried herself with a confidence that belied her age. Growing up in a small, close-knit town, Sarah had always harbored dreams of making a mark in the bustling metropolis. Her childhood was filled with the gentle hum of crickets and the comforting routine of familiar faces. But Sarah's heart yearned for the vibrant chaos of city life, where opportunities were as vast as the skyline itself. Her journey to the city was propelled by a promising job offer from a prestigious marketing firm, a testament to her hard work and unwavering dedication. Sarah had always been a go-getter, graduating top of her class and quickly climbing the ranks in her previous roles. The transition from her quaint hometown to the frenetic energy of the city was both exhilarating and daunting. She embraced the challenge, viewing it as the next great adventure in her life. Every morning, as she navigated the crowded streets and towering skyscrapers, Sarah felt a thrill of excitement and an unshakable belief that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Despite the initial culture shock, Sarah quickly adapted to the city's relentless pace. Her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in a lively neighborhood, became her sanctuary. The blend of eclectic shops, vibrant nightlife, and the constant hum of activity around her apartment filled her with a sense of belonging. She reveled in the diversity and the endless possibilities that the city offered. With a heart full of dreams and a mind brimming with ideas, Sarah was ready to seize every opportunity that came her way, unaware that her journey would soon take a dark and unexpected turn. Sarah recently moved to a new city for a job opportunity, leaving behind the familiar comforts of her small hometown. The bustling metropolis was a stark contrast to the quiet streets she had known all her life. Her new apartment, a modest one-bedroom unit on the 5th floor of a bustling building, overlooked the heart of the city. The skyline was dotted with towering skyscrapers, their lights twinkling like stars against the night sky. It was a view she had dreamed of, and now it was her reality. The sounds of honking cars, distant sirens, and the constant murmur of people became the new soundtrack to her life. Her job at a prestigious marketing firm was everything she had hoped for and more. The fast-paced environment, the challenging projects, and the opportunity to work with some of the brightest minds in the industry filled her days with a sense of purpose and excitement. Sarah quickly found herself immersed in her work, eager to prove her worth and make a lasting impression. Her colleagues were welcoming, and the office buzzed with creativity and ambition. It was a dynamic atmosphere that pushed her to excel, and she thrived on the energy and the endless possibilities that her new role presented. Outside of work, Sarah spent her evenings exploring the city, eager to soak in all it had to offer. The eclectic mix of cultures, the vibrant nightlife, and the countless cafes and restaurants provided endless opportunities for adventure. She marveled at the historic landmarks, the art galleries, and the bustling markets. Each day brought something new and exciting, a chance to discover another facet of the city she was beginning to call home. Despite the initial loneliness of being in a new place, Sarah felt a growing connection to the city and its rhythms. She was determined to carve out a place for herself, to build a life that was rich with experiences and opportunities. Sarah's initial excitement about the new place and job was palpable. The city's vibrant pulse matched the rhythm of her eager heart. Every morning, she awoke to the golden light streaming through her apartment windows, feeling a rush of anticipation for the day ahead. Her new job at the prestigious marketing firm was a dream come true. The office, with its sleek, modern design and panoramic views of the cityscape, was a hub of creativity and innovation. Sarah thrived in this environment, where ideas flowed freely and collaboration was the norm. Each project she tackled was a new adventure, a chance to prove her skills and make her mark. Exploring the city was equally exhilarating. Sarah found herself captivated by the eclectic mix of cultures and the endless array of activities. Weekends were spent wandering through art galleries, attending outdoor concerts, and sampling exotic foods from bustling street markets. The energy of the city was infectious, and Sarah eagerly immersed herself in its offerings. She loved the anonymity and the diversity, the way every street seemed to hum with life and possibility. Even mundane tasks like grocery shopping felt like an adventure in this new, vibrant setting. At night, as she lay in bed, Sarah reflected on her new life with a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. The city's lights twinkled outside her window, a constant reminder of the boundless opportunities that awaited her. She felt a profound sense of belonging, as if she had finally found a place that matched her ambitions and dreams. The challenges of adapting to a new environment only fueled her determination. With each passing day, Sarah grew more confident and more excited about the future. She knew that this city, with all its chaos and beauty, was where she was meant to be. The first encounter happened on a brisk autumn morning as Sarah navigated her usual commute. The subway station was bustling with its usual throng of early morning travelers, each lost in their world of hurried footsteps and flickering phone screens. Amidst the crowd, a prickling sensation of being watched began to creep over her. As she stepped onto the platform, she glanced around, her eyes scanning the sea of unfamiliar faces. That's when she saw him, a man standing a few meters away, his eyes fixed intently on her. His presence was unnerving, a shadow in the corner of her vision that she couldn't quite shake. Sarah tried to dismiss the feeling as mere paranoia, chalking it up to the natural anxiety of being in a new city. Yet, as the days went by, the man's face became a recurring sight. Whether she was boarding the train, exiting at her stop, or walking the few blocks to her office, she felt his gaze following her. He was always there, a silent observer blending into the background of her daily routine. His nondescript clothing and the hood that obscured his face made him difficult to describe, adding to the unsettling sense of anonymity. Each encounter left her more rattled, the unease gnawing at her once steadfast confidence. One evening, as she was heading home, the feeling escalated. The train car was unusually empty, the usual rush hour crowd thinning out. Sarah spotted him again, sitting at the far end, his eyes never leaving her. She could feel the intensity of his stare, a cold shiver running down her spine. She decided to get off a stop early, hoping to lose him in the crowd. As the doors slid open, she quickly exited, her heart pounding. But as she hurried up the stairs and into the street, she risked a glance over her shoulder and saw him, maintaining his distance but still following her. Panic surged through her veins, and for the first time, Sarah realized this was more than just a coincidence. At first, Sarah brushed it off as paranoia. She had always been cautious, and moving to a bustling city had heightened her senses. She told herself that the man on the subway was just another commuter, someone whose schedule happened to align with hers. Coincidences were common in a city teeming with millions. Yet, the rationalizations did little to quell the uneasy feeling that crept up her spine each time she saw him. She reminded herself to stay focused on her new job, her new life, and the exciting opportunities that lay ahead. The first few times she noticed him, she made conscious efforts to change her routine. She switched the time she left her apartment, took different routes to work, and even altered her subway stops. Each change brought a temporary sense of relief, a reassurance that she was in control. But inevitably, she would catch sight of him again, always on the periphery of her vision, always watching. It was unnerving, but Sarah was determined not to let her imagination get the best of her. She confided in her new friends at work, who reassured her that it was probably nothing, just city life taking some getting used to. Despite their reassurances, the incidents began to gnaw at her. The nagging feeling of being watched seeped into her daily life, making her more vigilant and on edge. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, scanning the faces in the crowd for any sign of him. Even in the safety of her apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling. She double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, ensuring they were secure before bed each night. She told herself it was just a precaution, a necessary adjustment to city living. But deep down, Sarah knew that her unease was more than just paranoia. It was a warning she couldn't afford to ignore. The city was a sprawling mosaic of life and movement, each neighborhood pulsating with its own unique rhythm. Sarah's apartment was nestled in a lively district known for its eclectic charm. The streets were lined with brownstones and small shops, their facades a mix of modern renovations and historic character. Every morning, she passed a bustling cafe where the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the chatter of patrons. The flower shop on the corner spilled vibrant blooms onto the sidewalk, adding splashes of color to the urban landscape. These familiar sights brought a comforting sense of routine to Sarah's days, grounding her in the vibrant tapestry of city life. Her daily commute was a study in organized chaos. The subway station, with its labyrinthine tunnels and throngs of hurried commuters, was a microcosm of the city's relentless energy. The tiled walls echoed with the constant hum of activity, from the rhythmic clattering of trains to the murmur of countless conversations. Sarah had come to recognize the regulars on her route: a young mother with her toddler, the elderly man who always read the newspaper, and the group of college students animatedly discussing their classes. These fleeting connections, while anonymous, provided a reassuring backdrop to her journey, a sense of normalcy amidst the urban hustle. Sarah's office was perched high in a sleek, glass-walled skyscraper that offered breathtaking views of the city below. The open-plan workspace buzzed with creativity and collaboration, the air filled with the soft click of keyboards and the occasional burst of laughter. Her desk was a sanctuary of personal touches, photos of family and friends, a potted plant that thrived under the expansive windows, and an ever-growing stack of marketing proposals. The office culture was one of innovation and support, where colleagues became friends and projects felt like joint ventures. This professional environment, with its blend of routine and excitement, was a haven where Sarah felt both challenged and at ease. The escalation began subtly, almost innocuously. One evening, as Sarah scrolled through her social media feed, a new message notification popped up. The sender was an account she didn't recognize. No profile picture, no followers, just a generic username. The message was simple: "Hi, Sarah." She hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was an old friend or a colleague, but something about the message felt off. Ignoring it, she went back to her evening routine, dismissing it as spam. But the next day, another message appeared, this time saying, "I see you're enjoying your new city." The messages became more frequent, each one more unsettling than the last. "Nice dress today," one read, sent on a day when she had worn a new blue dress to work. Another said, "You look tired on the subway this morning." The realization that someone was observing her so closely sent chills down her spine. She tried to block the accounts, but new ones kept popping up, as persistent as they were anonymous. Sarah's initial unease grew into a gnawing fear. The messages were not just intrusive, they were invasive, hinting at a knowledge of her daily routines and personal choices that no stranger should possess. Her sense of security began to erode. Every time she logged onto her social media, she felt a wave of dread, anticipating the next message. She confided in her friends and colleagues, but without knowing who was behind the messages, there was little they could do to help. The police were sympathetic but told her there was not much they could do without more concrete evidence. Sarah tightened her privacy settings, changed her passwords, and even considered deleting her accounts altogether. Yet, the messages kept coming, each one a stark reminder that someone was watching her every move. The vibrant city that once felt so full of opportunity now seemed filled with unseen threats, and Sarah's excitement about her new life was overshadowed by a growing sense of paranoia and fear. At first, the messages were almost benign, if not slightly unsettling. "Hi," Sarah read the first anonymous text she received, followed by, "How was your day?" Sarah dismissed them as harmless attempts at conversation, perhaps from a misguided admirer or an overzealous stranger who had stumbled across her profile. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the nature of these messages began to change. "I saw you at the cafe today. You looked beautiful in that red dress." The specificity of the observation sent a chill down her spine. She had indeed worn a red dress that day, and the thought that someone had been close enough to notice but had remained unseen was deeply unnerving. As the messages continued, they grew increasingly personal, touching on details of her life that she hadn't shared publicly. "Your morning runs seem to be paying off," one message read, referencing her daily jogs through the neighborhood park. Another, more disturbing, said, "I hope you sleep well tonight," sent just as she was preparing for bed. The invasiveness of these messages shattered any semblance of safety she felt. It wasn't just that someone was watching her. They were close enough to track her habits and routines with alarming accuracy. Each notification on her phone became a source of anxiety, the harmless pretense of the initial messages giving way to a sinister undercurrent. The tipping point came with a message that was not just personal but explicitly threatening. "You looked scared on the subway today. You should be more careful." Sarah's heart pounded as she read and reread the words, the implicit menace clear. This was no longer just an unwelcome intrusion into her privacy. It was a direct threat to her safety. She felt a pervasive sense of dread, her daily routines now shadowed by the fear of the unknown. Each step she took, every face in the crowd, became a potential threat. The vibrant city that had once promised adventure and opportunity now felt like a labyrinth of hidden dangers, each message tightening the web of fear around her. Sarah's anxiety began to escalate rapidly, seeping into every aspect of her daily life. She found herself constantly on edge, her senses heightened to an almost unbearable degree. Every notification on her phone sent a jolt of panic through her, making her heart race and her breath quicken. She started to dread the familiar ping, knowing it could mean another intrusive message. Her once leisurely walks to the subway were now hurried and tense, her eyes darting around, scanning every face in the crowd for signs of recognition or threat. The city's previously comforting bustle now felt oppressive, a cacophony of potential dangers lurking in every corner. Her vigilance extended beyond her commutes. At work, she found it increasingly difficult to concentrate, her mind perpetually racing with worry. She began to notice the smallest details: an unfamiliar car parked near her building, a stranger lingering a little too long near the entrance. Every unfamiliar sight fed her growing paranoia. She developed a habit of checking and rechecking her locks multiple times before bed, the ritual offering a fleeting sense of security. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fragile fortress, vulnerable to unseen intruders. Sleep became elusive, her nights filled with restless tossing and turning, haunted by the fear of what might come next. The constant state of alertness was exhausting, both mentally and physically. Sarah's social life began to suffer as she withdrew from her friends, too fearful to enjoy the city's offerings or even to meet them for a simple coffee. She confided in a few close colleagues, who offered support but could do little to alleviate her fears. They suggested she report the messages to the authorities again. But Sarah knew that without more concrete evidence, their hands were tied. Her once bright and promising new life in the city was overshadowed by an ever-present sense of dread. The vibrant streets that had initially filled her with excitement now seemed to close in around her. Each day a struggle to maintain a semblance of normalcy in the face of mounting terror. One evening, Sarah returned to her apartment after a particularly long day at work, hoping to find some solace within her own four walls. As she stepped through the door, a strange sensation prickled at the back of her neck. Something was off. She glanced around the living room, her eyes immediately landing on her coffee table. The books she had neatly stacked were now slightly askew, and her favorite mug, which she always kept in the kitchen, was sitting on the table, half filled with cold coffee. She had no recollection of leaving it there. The hairs on her arms stood up as a wave of unease washed over her. Determined to dismiss it as a mere oversight, Sarah moved into the bedroom, but the unsettling signs continued. Her closet door, which she always left closed, was ajar. Inside, a few hangers were empty, their usual occupants missing. Her jewelry box, usually tucked safely in her dresser drawer, was sitting on her bed, its contents slightly disarrayed. Panic began to set in as she realized these weren't simple accidents. Someone had been in her apartment. Her sanctuary had been violated, and the once safe space now felt alien and hostile. She quickly checked the windows and door, confirming they were locked, but the intruder's presence lingered in the air. Sarah's first instinct was to call the police, and when they arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the apartment. Despite her fears, there were no signs of forced entry, and nothing seemed to be stolen. The officers were sympathetic but could do little without concrete evidence. They advised her to stay vigilant and suggested changing her locks, which she did immediately. That night, as she lay in bed, every creak and groan of the building felt amplified. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist with malevolent intent. Sleep was a distant hope, replaced by a relentless fear that someone could so easily invade her life. She felt trapped in her own home, her anxiety mounting with every passing moment. Sarah sat on her couch, her phone trembling in her hands as she dialed the police. When the dispatcher answered, she recounted the disturbing details: the misplaced mug, the ajar closet, the disarrayed jewelry box. An officer arrived within minutes, his presence providing a fleeting sense of security. He walked through the apartment with her, carefully examining each room. Despite Sarah's palpable fear, there were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no conclusive evidence of an intruder. The officer's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Without more concrete evidence, there's not much we can do," he explained gently. "We can increase patrols in the area and suggest you stay alert. Make sure your locks are secure." Frustration mingled with Sarah's fear as the officer left. She felt the weight of her isolation. Her sanctuary had been violated, yet there was no tangible proof to hold on to, no concrete action to take. The police had offered practical advice: changing the locks, installing additional security measures, staying vigilant. She did all of these things, but it felt like a band-aid on a deeper wound. The sense of safety she once felt in her apartment was shattered. She couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been inside was watching, waiting for another chance to invade her space. That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound magnified by her heightened senses. The usual creaks and groans of the building became sinister whispers, feeding her growing paranoia. She kept her phone beside her, the police number on speed dial, but it did little to comfort her. Sleep was a distant hope, replaced by a relentless vigil against an unseen threat. Every rustle of the wind outside her window, every distant footstep in the hallway, sent her heart racing. She realized that, without concrete evidence, she was trapped in a nightmare where the fear was real, but the proof was elusive. Her world had been upended, and she felt helpless to reclaim the peace she once knew. Sarah's fear became an omnipresent shadow, darkening every corner of her life. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against her windows, became a harbinger of potential danger. She found herself constantly on edge, her senses perpetually heightened, anticipating the next intrusion. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of calm and comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of unseen threats. The smallest sound in the night would jolt her awake, her heart pounding, her mind racing with thoughts of the faceless intruder. The fear was suffocating, wrapping around her like a vice, squeezing tighter with each passing day. Her growing paranoia began to seep into her daily routines, altering her behavior in ways she scarcely recognized. She avoided eye contact with strangers, her gaze constantly shifting, scanning for any sign of familiarity or threat. Walking to and from work, she would frequently glance over her shoulder, her pace quickening with every unfamiliar face she passed. Even in the crowded subway, she felt isolated, her eyes darting from person to person, searching for the hooded figure that haunted her memories. The once bustling cityscape now seemed to close in around her, the throngs of people no longer a source of comfort but of potential danger. Social interactions became strained as Sarah withdrew further into herself. Friends and colleagues noticed the change, her laughter less frequent, her smile strained. She confided in a few, but their reassurances did little to soothe her. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching, lurking just out of sight. At home, she double-checked and triple-checked her locks, installed extra security cameras, and kept a knife by her bedside, all measures that provided only the flimsiest illusion of safety. Her world had shrunk to the confines of her apartment and her office, each day a struggle to maintain a facade of normalcy while the specter of fear loomed ever larger in her mind. One night, as Sarah sat in her living room attempting to distract herself with a book, a sudden, soft scraping sound caught her attention. Her heart rate spiked as she strained to listen, every muscle tensing in anticipation. The noise grew louder and more deliberate, emanating from her apartment door. The realization hit her like a cold wave. Someone was trying to break in. Her breath hitched, and she quietly set the book aside, reaching for her phone with trembling hands. She dialed 911, whispering her address and the urgent situation to the dispatcher, her voice barely steady. As she waited for the police, the door handle jiggled violently, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone trying to force the lock. Sarah's fear reached a fever pitch, her thoughts racing as she scanned the room for anything she could use to defend herself. She grabbed a heavy lamp from the side table, gripping it tightly, her eyes never leaving the door. The moments stretched into an eternity, the only sounds her rapid breathing and the continued assault on her door. She positioned herself behind the couch, trying to make herself as small and inconspicuous as possible while maintaining a view of the entrance. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and a shadowy figure stepped into the dimly lit apartment. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears as she mustered every ounce of courage, ready to confront the intruder. Just as the figure took another step inside, the sound of approaching sirens pierced the air, and flashing lights illuminated the room. The intruder froze, then turned and bolted, disappearing into the night. Moments later, police officers stormed in, weapons drawn, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Sarah dropped the lamp, her knees giving way as relief and shock washed over her. The officers quickly secured the area, but the intruder had vanished. Sarah knew that the nightmare was far from over, but for that moment, She was safe, surrounded by the comforting presence of the police. With trembling hands, Sarah dialed 911, her voice shaking as she whispered her address and the urgent details of the attempted break-in. "Please hurry," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. She could hear the operator's calm, reassuring voice trying to keep her composed, but her panic was mounting with each passing second. The sounds of the intruder trying to force the lock were growing louder and more desperate, echoing ominously through the small apartment. Every nerve in her body was on high alert, her mind racing with thoughts of what she would do if the stalker succeeded in breaking in. As she waited for the police, Sarah scrambled to find a place to hide, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the intruder might hear it. She crouched behind the couch, gripping a heavy lamp she had grabbed from the side table, her knuckles white with tension. The door handle jiggled violently, followed by a loud thud as the intruder threw his weight against it. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, silently willing the police to arrive faster. Just as the door began to give way, she heard the distant but unmistakable sound of sirens, growing louder with each passing moment. The intruder hesitated, then tried one last time to force the door, but the approaching sirens seemed to make him reconsider. In a burst of motion, the door swung open and the shadowy figure stepped into the dimly lit apartment. But as the police sirens blared just outside, the intruder spun on his heels and bolted back into the hallway, disappearing into the night. Moments later, the police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they secured the apartment. Sarah, still clutching the lamp, dropped it to the floor, her knees buckling as relief and shock coursed through her. The officers quickly checked the premises but found no trace of the stalker. Despite their comforting presence, Sarah knew the threat was far from over, but at that moment, the terror of the night had receded, replaced by a fragile sense of safety. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's life remained a tense balance of vigilance and fear. However, a breakthrough came one evening when the police called with news that left her both stunned and relieved. They had caught her stalker. The officer explained that they had traced the online harassment back to a specific IP address, which led them to a familiar name, Mark, a colleague from her office. The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had known Mark for months, shared meetings and coffee breaks, never suspecting that he harbored such a sinister obsession. The next day at work, the atmosphere was charged with shock and disbelief as the news of Mark's arrest spread. Sarah's colleagues were supportive, but she could see the questions in their eyes. How could someone they worked with every day be capable of such terrifying behavior? Mark had always seemed quiet and unassuming, blending into the background of the bustling office. As details emerged, it became clear that his obsession had grown over time, fueled by casual interactions that Sarah had barely noticed. The anonymous messages, the stalking, the break-in, it had all been part of his twisted fixation. The legal proceedings that followed were a blur of testimonies and courtroom appearances. Sarah had to recount her ordeal in front of strangers, reliving the fear and anxiety that had consumed her life. Mark sat across the courtroom, his demeanor calm and detached, as if he were a mere spectator. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was eventually convicted on multiple charges, including stalking and attempted breaking and entering. The sense of relief that washed over Sarah was immense, but so was the lingering sense of betrayal. Knowing that someone she had trusted and worked alongside had invaded her life so completely was a wound that would take time to heal. Despite this, the capture and conviction of her stalker marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could finally start to reclaim her sense of safety and peace. In the weeks following Mark's conviction, Sarah began the slow and painful process of recovery. She sought the help of a therapist who specialized in trauma, someone who could help her navigate the complex emotions that lingered. Each session was a step forward, a chance to unpack the fear, anger and betrayal she had carried for so long. The therapist introduced her to grounding techniques, helping her stay present during moments when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. Slowly, Sarah began to reclaim small parts of her life that had been overshadowed by fear. She started with short walks around her neighborhood, then gradually extended her activities, rediscovering the joy in things she once loved. Reflection became a crucial part of her healing journey. Sarah often found herself thinking about the impact the stalking had on her life. It wasn't just the physical intrusion. It was the constant erosion of her sense of safety and trust. She remembered the days she spent second-guessing every decision, the nights she lay awake, her mind racing with fear. The stalking had changed her, leaving her more cautious and guarded. But it had also revealed a strength within her that she hadn't known existed. She had faced her worst fears and had come out the other side, scarred but not defeated. This realization became a cornerstone of her recovery, a reminder that she was more resilient than she ever imagined. Sarah's journey towards reclaiming her life was marked by small victories and newfound resilience. She reconnected with friends, sharing her experiences and allowing their support to lift her spirits. She returned to work, finding solace in the routine and the camaraderie of her colleagues. Her apartment, once a place of dread, slowly became a sanctuary again, fortified with new security measures and a renewed sense of ownership. Each day, she made a conscious effort to live fully, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. The trauma of the past would always be a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Sarah was determined to build a future where she was in control, a future bright with possibilities and free from the shadows of her past. If you like these stories, check out the book in the description of the video. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of terror. Until next time, stay safe and beware the shadows.